When I first started this project for my complex analysis class, I was like, wow, I am really bad at math and I don't even know where to start. But I had seen these pretty pictures towards the beginning of class. There were these little swirls and patterns, and I was like, yeah, I do art. I'll just look at those and be like, look, art and math. It'll be simple. It'll be easy. Spoiler alert, it was neither simple nor easy, but man, it was so cool. I think I have discovered my new favorite subject in math called fractal geometry. I almost don't like just calling it that because there's so much more to it. The things that it leads into and that like come out of it, it's like an actual rabbit hole that just keeps going and like going and going and going. Much like fractals themselves. I'll see myself out. I guess we can start at the beginning with actual monsters. No, really, that's what they were called. Three mathematicians, Sierpinski, Cantor, and Koch, found these shapes, which are just absolutely wild. They were literally finite-looking curves with infinite length. So you could look at the shape, and it looks pretty normal, but as you zoom in, the edge becomes more and more complex to the point of being infinite. No one really knew what to do with these at the time. They were literally like, well, what do we do? And they just collectively decided that they were too scary and immediately forgot about them. The end. Just kidding. They noticed these shapes had these repetitions, iterations you could say. Felix Klein, a mathematician, was like, wow, these repetitions are sort of symmetrical in a way, aren't they? So he came up with this new symmetry that was basically just doing a function over and over and over again. And he stuck specifically to Mobius transformations, which will come up later. Then this guy, Gaston Julia, who is basically Mermaid Man and has a fantastic name, came along and was like, yeah, those iterations are dope. I'm going to do those a lot. And he found these wild sets that would sometimes converge into these lovely orbits. Keep these in mind. They'll be definitely very important later. Also, keep in mind that this was before there were really any computers around to help with all this graphing and iterations and drawings and repetition. So they basically did all of these drawings by hand. Like, can you imagine that? Just absolutely blows my mind. And it's absolutely wild to me because they had this idea that math and art were just like not compatible. But here you have these awesome mathematicians doing these awesome art pieces, and it just blows me away. Of course, this project is about art and mathematics, so of course, this will come into play later. A few years later, this guy Mandelbrot basically became the god of fractals. He literally made up the word, absolute madman, but I'm getting ahead of myself. He saw Julia's work and was like, it's weird that some of these sets converge and some don't. So he basically plotted a ton of these different convergent sets and found this super weird shape that was kind of frilly at the edges and had little bits floating around all over the place. And honestly, it changed everything. The first image of this doesn't really look like a lot. It looks like a little blob made out of a bunch of little dots. But once computers were able to show the actual full rendered shape of this, you were able to see all of the little repetition bits that were present in the monsters that we talked about before. They were present in the monsters, in Klein's symmetry, and the Julia sets. So this set that he plotted and really defined became known now as the Mandelbrot set, of course. One crazy thing about the Mandelbrot set is that when you zoom in, you can start to see the Julia sets that it's actually made of. It's also full of all kinds of cool patterns. Right here in this little crevice is called Seahorse Alley for obvious reasons. And of course you can zoom in and see the original Mandelbrot set all over. This property is called self-similarity, and it can be found all over the place. Mandelbrot saw this in transmitting information over telephone lines when first developing computer systems at IBM. This self-similarity is also present in plants, heartbeats, ancient artwork, architecture, snowflakes, veins, clouds, population growth, ocean currents, coastlines, nebulas, and our universe as a whole. Have you ever heard of the golden ratio? Tell me your secret. Show me your mathematical model. Okay, let me collect my thoughts before we get to that. This set was a gateway to all kinds of wild fractals, including the ones that look like burning ships like this one, or this one that looks like a fern. Or these I made while researching for this video because I needed to make some myself because they're just that cool. These fractals opened up some insane gateways into all sorts of other mathematics like topography and hyperbolic geometry, which is super awesome, but I'm not insane, so I was not able to become an expert in a few weeks for this project. As cool as that would be. People started finding new ways to really explore these new forms. One of those were these things called Indra's pearls. These were first explored by our buddy, Klein, but they really got expanded with the work of David Mumford, Caroline Series, and David Wright in their book on the subject. My professor pointed me to this book, which was just about 300 pages long, and I was like, oh god, this is going to be a slog to get through. But I was lucky, and Series had given a presentation in February of this year, so I didn't have to read the whole thing. This is of course linked down in the bio. These pearls were created using Mobius mappings, iterated an infinite number of times. In order to make them, the writers found a formula to help you find your initial maps. And they gave it a fantastic name, Grandma's Recipe, which is just really great. Basically, for all my math people out there, you need a 2x2 complex matrix with a determinant equal to 1. You just add the diagonals and you get a number, which is either TA or TB. Then you can use Grandma's Recipe to find the limit set. Of course, you won't get a nice pearl, or even a tangible pattern every time. Unlike Julia's sets, there didn't seem to be a way to find where they were going to come out nice, which is called discrete, or whether they would become a mess, or become chaotic, or non-discrete. What they found, though, is that the edge of where the pearls stopped, so right on the edge of where the numbers would turn into pearls, into chaos and absolute messes, they would come out into these nice, beautiful fractal patterns. The discovery of these pearls, the fractal patterns, the Mandelbrot set, and Julia sets all led to an absolute explosion in art combined with mathematics. Before this, there had been some crossover, but art and math were largely segregated subjects. Math was very number-heavy and manifested itself in strings of equations on paper, while art was big and bold and expressive and utilized different colors and patterns to imitate life, nature, emotion, and imagination. But, as I'm sure you've noticed in the pictures so far, the line between art and math became very blurred. I mean, of course you could see why. These patterns are beautiful, and with the right computer skills, you could use these to make amazing pictures, like this guy, Joss Lays, who does graphic art with different sorts of math. Then there's also Jane Barnes, who uses fractal design and clothing patterns. Fractals starting showing up in paintings, museums, sculptures, and decor. It became a sort of fad in the 1970s. Something you may be thinking is, wait a minute, I've definitely seen this sort of thing before. And not just in crazy computer graphics. And you'd be right. Artists have noticed this self-similarity in nature for thousands of years. The clouds and the waves in these paintings by Katsushika Hokusai. Sorry, I definitely butchered that. This Gothic architecture and these Native American weaving patterns all display this sort of iterative symmetry. Kind of shows how the line between art and math had really been artificial all along. Speaking of these patterns appearing in nature, let's talk about that. Fractals are all about repetition, growth, and patterns, which, of course, sounds familiar. These are all things that nature embody. All growth patterns follow this sort of spiral and self-similarity. Like trees with each branches having smaller and smaller branches, these clouds that billow and billow into smaller and smaller floofs, and this eyeball with smaller and smaller bits. Remember the golden ratio I mentioned? It's a whole other animal that is really, really cool, and I'd suggest looking at a video about it because it's really awesome and also really important. But, oh look, here it is. Oh, it's here too. Oh, and what? It's here? Oh, it's all over nature. And it's been utilized in design for thousands of years. Shocking. Side note, this is also true for hyperbolic geometry, as the plane is displayed in corals, flatworms, nudibranchs, and mushrooms. Fun fact, you can also crochet a model of the hyperbolic plane, which looks super cute, and I desperately want one. Another great example of math and art combined. It's like in the past, math wanted to be all exclusive and blocked out nature and art for years because they thought it wasn't structured or logical enough. But finally, when they saw the method to nature's madness, math begged them to let them in the cool, art, nature-loving hippie club, and art and nature. Not being bitter, let math back with open arms. This newfound relationship, of course, led to a new world of modeling and studying nature. Of course, the most important thing to come out of this was new and improved computer-generated images. Fractals became the star of all of your favorite movies. Star Wars, Fractals. Marvel, Fractals. All the new 3D Disney movies, that's right, Fractals. They basically made it so that animators could turn simple 3D shapes into complex, fully rendered maps in much the same way that natural features form in the real world. Of course, people also use them to do actual science and model nature and advanced technology, but like I said, CGI was the most important. Without it, we wouldn't have Bucky Barnes, Star Wars Rebels, or Frozen 2, and that is simply a world I do not want to live in. Fractals improved antenna for cell phones, circuit boards, computer networks, and medical care. Coastlines are a great example of this because of their inherent flaws. The philosophy of coastlines is basically that you can keep measuring with a smaller and smaller ruler and it's going to get longer and longer to infinity due to the smaller and smaller imperfections. Sounds familiar, right? Fractals can be used to model things that seem way too complicated to model, and this is, as you can imagine, vitally important for a world as chaotic as our own. They can also be used to make pretty pictures, which is also a plus. Thank you so much for watching. Links to more videos are in the description if you want to look more into the crazy but awesome world of fractals.